I love courtroom sketches. I don't care what the case is. I just find them so fascinating. I mean, just the fact that to this day of 2020, in 2026, 2024, we are still hiring these people to sketch. Obviously, for those who don't know, the courtroom sketch artists are allowed in when the press is not. And just the question of how that, how that decision was made in the first place is fascinating and weird enough to me, right? Like, who was the person that was like, all right, we can't, fine, we're not allowed to bring cameras in, but can I bring in a bunch of pastels and paper? Like, who was that person, first of all? But secondly, the likeness is rarely captured, and for all I know, it's the faces don't look like the actual celebrities in the sketches because they're not, like, maybe, for all I know, the artists are not allowed to do too good of a job at capturing their likeness. I don't know. I don't know. There's probably some sketches for the P. Diddy case. Yeah, I mean, it's like that. Like, what is this? Fist of the North Star? Look at that neck. And then also, if only we had some sort of technology where I could search for a video that talks about the history of courtroom sketches, or maybe like a day in the life of a courtroom sketch artist. But alas, no such thing exists, and so we are left to flip through the pages of this voter information pamphlet from 2022. I don't know how that got there. We shall be forced. That would have been so shitty if that cap was not on the water. That would have been so shitty. We shall be forced to flip through the pages of the official sample ballot for the general election of November 5th, 2024. Courtroom sketch history. Steam. Courtroom sketch artist Mona Edwards Schaefer documents history as it happens. It's a 2-minute and 45-second.
Steam series championed by your...
Why we still... Oh, look. Okay. It's a Vox thing.
Donald Trump and Martha Stewart all have in common. Christine Cornell. She's a courtroom artist who's captured all of them at their trials.
Everybody ends up in court. It's really amazing. I've been covering trials for the last 1,000 years, which is about 1975. I did Woody Allen and Mia Farrow. I've drawn Mick Jagger a couple of times. I've drawn Mike Tyson. I did just come off the Cosby trial recently, but I drew him probably 20 years ago.
We live in an age where people's phones have 4K cameras, and every dipshit on a snowboard has a GoPro attached to their head. So why do we still see old-school pastel sketches of so many trials? Courtroom illustrations are part of an old tradition that dates back to the infancy of the United States. But to figure out why we're still relying on them, we need to turn to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 53, which is exactly as exciting as it sounds. It's a law that basically says that you're not allowed to broadcast or take photographs of criminal proceedings inside of federal courtrooms. The ban on cameras was adopted in 1946, but its origin is often linked to the sensational coverage of the 1935 trial of Bruno Hauptmann for the murder of the Lindbergh baby. Most state courts have had a similar ban on cameras as well, which is why news outlets relied heavily on artists like Christine to document the trials. Courtroom photography has been a hotly debated issue for a long time. There are many who believe having cameras in all courtrooms will make for a more transparent judicial process. On the other hand, some people point to the O.J. Simpson trial as a prime example of why it might not be a good idea. A lengthy, complicated judicial process was turned into a primetime spectacle.
It's an unfair burden, I think, to put on a defendant because they are presumed innocent, for starts. And the camera is a brutal exposure. And the artists are a filter. There's just something that's a little more human. It's a little bit softer. It mitigates a little bit on behalf of the
I think she's a
person.
great artist.
One great thing about drawing as opposed to, cameras in the court.
But I mean, that was not the best drawing to cut away to.
That, that dramatizes or allows the drama to come out.
Why? Like, should we trust the extreme subjectivity of the artist? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, the reason I scoffed, the fact that the artist is a filter is exactly why I don't know why I sound like I'm so worked up about this. I can't tell if it's funny to me or not that the subjectivity of an artist could be or should be trusted in anything close to an unbiased representation of a defendant, which she, I think it's borderline comical because she's just moments earlier she's talking about how much she sympathizes with the vulnerable position that the defendant is in. And then, of course, they of all the things for the editor to cut to next is the drawing of like the least human, not only the most biased, but the least human looking, after she just said that it's about, treating humans like humans or whatever. And now we shall transition to story time. Before I tell the story, I want you to understand I'm fully aware that the camera just shut off. But I don't care, you see. I wanted that to happen. Why? Because, you see, story time is about closing the eyes, closing the camera lens, and allowing the words of a storyteller to whisk you away to another time, another place. And today that time and place is 1994. I was... fuck it all. I'm going to cut and get the video back on. 1 second. Thanks for bearing with me. Yeah, we're back here. So, the year was 1994. I was a preteen, I believe, maybe 12, 12, maybe 13 years old. There were a lot of kids living on my block in the suburbs. And just behind... just maybe a suburban block away, where a lot of my peers at the time would play and ride our bikes, there were these very low hanging power lines, and you could hear them buzzing, when you walked by them. And at one point, this concerned some of the parents so much that a few of the parents started organizing and got together and actually organized a demonstration because they wanted to raise awareness and concern about the possible radiation, I believe was a word that was being thrown around at the time. Something was in the air that they didn't like. So they organized this demonstration, which got a pretty considerable turnout. And what they did was they all went to Home Depot and bought some long fluorescent lights and brought them onto the grassy knoll underneath these power lines, these buzzing power lines. And interestingly enough, when they held up these fluorescent lights under the power lines, they would, sure enough, light up. And those who were laughing were not laughing anymore at this, at this whole tin foil hat wearing paranoia amongst this, small handful of parents. So I can do one of two things at this point. One, I can tell you what happened next. I can tell you what legal action may or may not have been taken. I can tell you whether or not I remember whether legal action was taken. I can tell you whether or not I remember anything that happened afterwards. Or I can play you the song that I wrote about this. And I think I'm going to do this the latter, because I already have a tuned guitar. It's called Power Lines. Oh, show me the power lines where you held up fluorescent lights that you bought from Home Depot. Should have been, could have been, should have